Good evening. Okay, welcome everybody to the continuing and ongoing Daf Yomi cycle. And we are currently at the top of Ayin Tassim Beis. But first, we want to introduce the exciting new edition of the Art Scroll Schwartz edition of Sefer Kodshim, Maseches Zevachim, Volume the Third. Out of four, is there another? No, this is the last one. This is it. Mm-hmm. So if you've got the three, you are complete, which is an amazing thing. Completing a whole whole Maseches Zevachim. Think about how many people have done that. It is probably a smallish number relative to all Kahal Yisrael, and it's just an amazing thing. And we are now 2/3 of the way through it, so it's just pretty amazing, and it's not that scary. It turns out it's been a nice Masechta, right? We've been doing some complications at times, but it's always pretty good. Yeah. This edition is being presented to our own Josh Bernstein for his excellent Daf Yomi participation, right? So I'm used to presenting awards and things, so you have to come up and hold this and give a smile.
We did the red carpet,
but I will.
And available to anybody who.
That's a good point.
$18.
Yes, everyone and anyone who is willing to be a regular participant in the Daf Yomi of Kahal Yereim can receive this not this very same one, but a similar edition for $18.
A bargain
at twice the price. Yes. Thank you very much. Thank you for your everyone's attendance, and we continue on the top of the page.
The crowd's going wild.
The crowd is wild. The crowd is definitely wild. Okay, Tana Rabbanan. Charson shel zav v'zava. Okay, we had learned, Rabbi Yehuda had said that if you mix blood together with blood, so then it's not batal. That's Rabbi Yehuda's continuing shita. Min ben mino is not batal. We did have Abaye suggest that was his Rebbe's position and not his position, but we're going to continue throughout Shas with the presumption that it's Rabbi Yehuda's own position. Min ben mino, if you have two items of the same type, they are not nullified. The Chachamim disagree with that position. Tanu Rabbanan and Rabbis learn Charson shel zav v'zava. So you've got this piece of pottery that it was used. They had chamber pots back then, right? You had to get up in the middle of the night, use washroom. You had to go outside, right? Not everybody wants to go outside, so they would have pots to be able to relieve themselves in their bedrooms. Chamber pots.
You mean like urinal type of thing?
Yes, right. But they are chamber pots, okay? So they're made out of earthenware, right? Some inexpensive material. The thing about earthenware material is that it absorbs whatever it contains. So if this person is tameh of a zav, so his urine is metame, it creates tuma as well as an avatuma, just like the zav does himself. So now this chamber pot was used by a zav. Now the owner of this chamber pot, or maybe it's not the owner, whatever it is, somebody who now has this chamber pot wants to cleanse the chamber pot. You can't bring a earthenware utensil to a mikvah. But luckily enough, we talked about absorbed flavors in cooked. If you cook something in an earthenware utensil, and we said there was no way to get that flavor out, but that's because it was absorbed through heat. If the flavor is not absorbed through heat, turns out, according to this, you can get rid of that. You can get that material out of the utensil. If you are Pam Rishon, if you wash it one time, Visheni, you wash it a second time, Tameh, the pot is still Tameh. Shlishi, the third time, Tahor. The third time already, now you've washed it. So you basically have to rinse it out 3 times. The third time, then you can consider that you have removed all of the bad of Tameh Tumas Meiraglaim liquid from it.
And wash and dry cycle?
It's a good question. It doesn't even seem to say that you necessarily have to dry it. You just have to soak it, and then soak it again with clean water again, and then soak it again. Right?
So like soap is not a...
It doesn't say anything about soap at all.
We don't mean that when we say wash.
And it could be that if you use soap, right, that you could clean it faster, right? It could be, but this is just with water.
It sounds like I wash my veggies as a mashkiach.
By the way, right, that there could be a relationship with that. Is that basically you're see there you're trying to wash off something from the outside rather than wash something that's absorbed, because you're learning about bugs, right? So essentially you're trying to wash something from the outside. I don't know if it's the same halacha. It just happens to be that yes, we wash things 3 times in order to be able to verify triple wash. But this is because you're trying to get the tameh liquid out of the utensil. Okay. When is that? Shenosan letocho mayim. right? Now, that's only if you're rinsing it with water. If you didn't use water to rinse it out, let's say you just continue to use it as a chamber pot, and so somebody else urinates in it. So now, afilu asiri tame, even if it's used 10 times, it still doesn't rinse out. Why is that? Because min bimino, it's urine in urine, isn't bottle. So therefore, each new urine that goes in, the whole thing becomes tame urine, and now it continues to get reabsorbed, and it doesn't clean it out.
Time to get a new one then.
So, or you need water, right? You have to use water. But your point is, you can't say, well, it got rinsed out by non-tame, and it's okay. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov says, Shlishi afa pishalon nasan l'tocha mayim tar. Even 3 times, even if it's not water, it's okay. And why? Because he doesn't hold. So he says that it's not. He says that it's not. It's tuma and tara can even be 2 different things. So if it's not necessarily min bimino, and therefore 3rd time, if the urine is tahor, it's going to consider it to be rinsed out. Now, whose opinion is the Tanna Kama? He's not quoted, right? So whose opinion is this? Who says that since you're rinsing it with urine each time, that it's not washed out? So that's going to be Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. Rabbi Yehuda, that's Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. Now, problem is, what we just said is that according to Rabbi Yehuda, you can rinse this out because it's with water. But problem is, we're a minute, we have a contradiction. Pishtan shetavaso nida misito tahor. If you've got a woman who's a nida, right? So so she's got spit, which is also going to be she's got spit, which is also tameh. She's tameh, so her spit is also tameh. So she's making flax. Now the flax has to get a little bit of liquid on it in order to make the fibers less brittle, because you're turning it from flax plant into linen, right? So you're going to spin it, and you're going to make it less by combing it. You're going to make it less brittle. So that's what she's doing. Now, if it's wet, right? If she has spun it using spit in order to be able to get it going. So now it has dried. If it's dried, so then it's tahor. Once the spit is gone, it's okay. So the whole thing is tahor. V'im hayalach misito tami. But if it's liquid, if it's wet, so then it's tame. Mishum mashke piha, because of the liquid from her mouth. Rabbi Yehuda says, af harotvo b'mayim tame. Mishum mashke piha. If you get this wet again, it dried. There's still spit on it, but it's dried, so it's not going to transfer tuma. But if you get it wet again, so now it's min bamino, and it's going to make it wet again, and therefore the tuma returns. So vafilu tuva, even if you've rinsed it with water many times. So now that's the contradiction, because we said when it came to the earthenware utensil, rinsing it 3 times was enough. Why is it that I can't take this flax and wet it, soak it 3 times, and it should be clean? Why is he saying that even if I've soaked it many times, it doesn't work? So I'm a Rav Papa says, Shani Rok de Courier. Spit is different. Spit is more absorbed than urine in an earthenware pot. So therefore, it doesn't come out even if you soak it. That's the point that he's trying to make. So that's why there's a contradiction. There's 2 different types of materials, 2 different types of situations. And they're not comparable.
That's why they use spit in the first place and not
Probably,
not water.
right? Because it gets... It's a good point. Nis'arev b'dama psul nishafech le'ama. So the Mishnah says the Tanna Kama and Rabbi Eliezer are disagreeing. Let's say I've got blood from a korban that mixes together with dam from a puzzle korban, or with dam atamtis, right? So we had those circumstances. The Tanna Kama holds that once the blood is mixed, it's tameh, and you have to be able to, even if the kosher blood is rove, you have to spill it out. You can't use it. And Rabbi Eliezer says it's okay. So now let's see what they're arguing about. But my kamiflagi, what is the point of their argument? Amar Rav Zvid says, Begozrin gezera b'mikdash kamiflagi. The question is, the Beis HaMikdash was a place where a lot of people are very careful about the things that they do. Is there a need, were the Rabbanan, when they made rabbinic decrees in order to prevent people from doing Averos, did they do that in the Beis HaMikdash? Was there a need for it? Or we just presume that people are going to be careful and we're okay, we don't need to make rabbinic enactments. Demar Savar Gozrin, what happens is, the Chachamim say, yes, we're worried. What's going to happen is that you'll mix together this puzzle blood together with the kosher blood, and if we let you use it, then tomorrow, when you have this puzzle blood, you'll just use the puzzle blood. Because you'll think, well, yesterday I used the puzzle blood, and you won't realize the reason you used it is because it was mixed with the kosher blood, and people will make that mistake. Therefore, we make a gezerah d'Rabbanan, don't use the mixture of the puzzle blood, so that you know you're never going to use the puzzle blood.
Has there ever been a time where someone offer a korban to Hashem on the mizbech and then made the whole mizbech puzzle, and you have to...
So the mizbeach isn't going to become puzzle by having a puzzle korban. The only way to ruin a mizbeach is to take parts off of it, or to smash it in some kind of way. Was there ever a circumstance where puzzle korbans came on the base of Mikdash? I cannot pinpoint a specific incident, having no records of it, but yes, I would presume so. Right? That's why we have all of these gemaras of these circumstances where it could happen. Now, Umar Savar Lo Gozrin. The other one says, no, it's the Beis HaMikdash. The Kohanim are very expert in the laws. They know what they're doing. If they are going to do it because it's mixed, there's no chance that they're going to use the puzzle blood tomorrow. That's the first version. Rav Papa Amar, no, that's not what's going on here. Dekuliyama Gozrin. Everyone agrees that we make rabbinic enactments. Even the best can make mistakes. And so therefore, we're going to always make rabbinic enactments to protect people from doing the wrong things. The argument here is the dam hatamtis possible to become more than the blood that is the dam hanefesh that's kosher, right? Is that likely to happen? Right? We know that the dam hanefesh splurts out first, then comes the dam hanefesh. The dam hanefesh, we would presume, comes out more slowly. It's unlikely that it's going to. Is it likely or unlikely that you could wind up with a majority of dam tamtis? Again, it's going to be batel in the majority. Min b'mino is batel barov according to everybody except Rabbi Yehuda. Right? Rabbi Yehuda again says min b'mino ain't no batel. It's not batel. But according to everybody else, min b'mino is batel barov. So mar savar shchiach. One says, yeah, it's very possible the dam tamtis could be more than the dam hanefesh, and therefore really this could be puzzle. In this circumstance it's not. Well, we're making a gezerah. Maybe we're not going to let you throw this blood that is a mixture of kosher blood and dam tamtis, because tomorrow you might wind with more dam tamtis than you have dam that's kosher, and you'll throw it again. And that time it'll be puzzle, because that time the rove will be the puzzle blood. Umar savar lo shchiach. The other one says that's not really that likely. It doesn't happen. Dam hanefesh sports out. There's a lot more blood there. Then the blood that's coming out later is less. Therefore, it's a very uncommon. And we have a rule that the Rabbanan never made enactments in uncommon circumstances. They wouldn't bother to make a gezerah that's not in a circumstance that's not common. So therefore, was this permissible to throw or not is dependent on whether it was common, whether it's possible that it would happen or not. If it's possible it would happen, the Rabbanan would have made a gezerah and say don't use it. And if it's not possible it happened, they would not have made such a gezerah.
Wouldn't that be easily
determined? We usually have these kind of circumstances, these situations where we say, isn't that just a matter of practical measurement? And yeah, maybe like you have to do some kind of scientific study in order to be able to see it. Always that's some of the question is that a question of mitzias. Seems to me like it is a question of mitzias. And maybe it wasn't so clear. Even the Metzias is not so clear. Maybe that's what's going on.
Maybe you have to wait for El Metzias to see that one.
Yeah, that Masech is not going to deal with this. So, Bishlam El Rav Papa, you can wait for it though. So Bishlam El Rav Papa, fine. According to Rav Papa, Hainu Dikatani Nisarev Bedam Hapsulin Yishavech La'ama. So according to Rav Papa, what's going on here makes sense. That's why it says that if it mixes together the Dam Hapsulim, right? Everyone agrees that you're going to spill it out. But bedamatamtis yishafech le'ama. And then it separates, gives us a separate case of damatamsis. Because when it comes to the dam that is psulim, nobody argues. Everyone agrees you got to spill it out because it's very possible. Rav Papa says, the issue is it possible or not? Well, it's very possible for you to have puzzle blood that mixes together with non-puzzle blood. Therefore, it says that's very possible. Everyone agrees that you got to spill that out. The argument is only on damatamtis. So therefore, that's why we separate the two cases, to tell us that Rabbi Eliezer would argue on only one of those two cases, not in both of the cases. El Rav Zvid, but according to Rav Zvid's explanation, that the whole issue is whether you make a gzera in the Beis HaMikdash or not in the first place. Li'arvinhu v'lisninu. Why don't you just put the two cases together? It really doesn't make a difference how much blood. The fact of the matter is that if you make a gzera in the Beis HaMikdash, any mixture is going to be a problem. And if you don't make Xeris in the Beis HaMikdash, then any mixture is not going to be a problem. Why would you not combine these two cases together? So, Kasha, that is indeed a problem for Rav Zvid. Okay, says the next Mishnah. Dam Tamimim Bedam Bali Mumin. Now you've mixed blood of a tamim, of a pure animal, right, that has no blemishes, Bedam Bali Mumin, with blood of an animal that has a mum. Yishafech La'ama. You got to spill it out, right? You got to kosher with puzzle, and even if, right, seems like it doesn't matter which is the rove, even if the rove is the kosher one, got to spill it out.
How do you have the blood of a blemished animal? Because it's an invalid offering.
Shouldn't even be there in the first place.
Exactly.
Correct. Yeah. So some mistake must have happened to get there, right? And then at some point somebody realizes, hey, you didn't use that animal, did you? Right. So
Actually,
yeah, right. Oh, that was the blood. Wait. Oops, and I mixed the blood up. So that is that's the, you have to imagine that the Beis HaMikdash was a hectic place, and so let's say they were investigating the animals, and even though this one got rejected, somehow it got back in line, and the guy who's doing the shechita isn't doing the checking, so he just presumes if it's here, it's probably fine. So I'm just going to keep on going with the shechita. Right? That's you got to presume it's some kind of mix up like that.
Right. Okay.
Right? Kos bekosos. Let's say you've caught the blood in different utensils, and the utensils get mixed up. So the blood is not mixed together. You've got all the different cups, and the cups are now mixed up. Rabbi Eliezer says, Imkar of kos echad yikravu kol kosos. This is the old Rabbi Eliezer shita. Once you've done one, you may as well do the rest, because we can presume the first one was the bad one. And it's too late, you've already done it. So you can't go backwards, so you may as well go forwards. And the Chachamim say, Afilu karvu kulon chutz meyachad mehen yishafech. Even if you've done all of them, but you haven't done one of them, you got to spill it out, because it could be the last one. So therefore, don't use it. Yishafech lama. Hanisanin lemata shenis arvu b'nisan lemala. Now, let's say you've got blood from a korban ola and a korban chatos, and they mix together. The blood of a korban chatos, not the birds, remember, we're talking about the animals. The chatos sprinkling application goes above the red line, one of the corners. The ola application goes below the red line. So you mix the two of these together. Now you've got a mixture of blood, and the blood is supposed to go above the red line, or is it supposed to go below the red line? What are you supposed to do? Rabbi Eliezer says, Yitain lemala. What you do is you first take this mixture of blood and you apply it above the red line. And and then what we figure is that the blood in here that is supposed to be done below, why are we applying it above? The answer is, we have in mind that if it's blood that's supposed to be applied below and I'm applying it above, then this is just water. It's nothing. Because remember, Rabbi Eliezer had interpreted that pasuk that we learned before, that if you do it shalol l'shem, the korban, you could burn, when we said, remember the meat that you're not supposed to burn on the mizbeach, if you do it as wood, you can burn it. So here too, if you're making an application of blood, if you do it as though it's just plain water, that's okay also. He says you could have in mind to remove it from being a korban. So basically you have an idea in your head. If it's a chatos, I'm applying the blood. If it's an ola, this is just water. It's nothing. It's not really an application at all. Then, v'yachzor v'yitain lamata. Then you go back down, and you apply the blood below the red line. Why do you do that? Because now maybe it's an ola. So you got to apply it below the red line. If it's an ola, you've applied it below the red line. If it's a chatos, then all you're doing is basically you're doing shirayim. Then you're taking the chatos blood that you applied above, then you go down below. Even though it's not really into the base, anything below the red line is considered to be acceptable as shirayim. So therefore, you haven't done anything wrong. You've just applied the blood to shirayim below. So therefore, that's how you do. You start, says Rabbi Eliezer, you start above with in mind that if it's the ola, that this is just water, and then you go below, and then you've basically done both a chatos sprinkling and an ola sprinkling to it, and you've covered your bases. You cannot do that. Yishafech la'ama, right? You got to spill it out. Why? Because you can't have in mind to apply something in the wrong way. So therefore, you can't do that. However, v'im lo nimlach, if the kohen didn't ask, and he does it that way, he does it Rabbi Eliezer's way, then v'nasan, then it's kosher. Then it is, in fact, kosher. Why? Because even though you're not allowed to apply it, now that you did, so then you can't go backwards. So in practice, it's taken care of. So therefore, you have applied it and it's kosher. Hanisanin b'matana achas, shinas arvu b'nisanin b'matana achas. Okay, let's say you've got blood that's applied, that's supposed to be applied. You have a korban that's supposed to have one blood application. Let's go back to our fourth parak. Remember, we talked about all the different korbanos. A bechor gets one blood application. So you've got blood of a bechor or blood of a meiser, and they get mixed up. Blood of a bechor and a meiser get mixed up, and they are now contained either in a single container or you mix up their two containers. So how are you supposed to apply the blood? So yinosnu b'matana achas. So you're simple. Since they both need one application, make one application. And since we are holding here that there's no minimal amount that's necessary, so then all you can do is make your one application if the blood is mixed and you have covered your bases for both korbanos. If it's two separate containers and you just don't know which, then just make one application from each container and you're okay because the application is going to be the same. Matan arba b'matan arba. Now you mixed up your shlamim and your ola. The shlamim and the ola both have shnayim shem arba. They're applied on two corners of the mizbeach, across the corners so that it goes on four sides of the mizbeach as we discussed. Right? So now, both of them have the same procedure. They're both done below the red line. They're both done two times, as though they're four, but they're mixed up. So what do? Yinosnu b'matan arba. So then you just make that blood application, two that are four, because it's going to cover your bases either way. It doesn't matter whether you know it's a shlamim or no, you're applying the blood properly and correctly, so go ahead. Everyone agrees that's fine too. Now comes the problem. Matan arba b'matan achas. You've mixed up your ola blood with your bechor blood. And now you've got a container here that it's got to be either applied two times that are four or one time. So here's our argument. Rabbi Eliezer says, Yinosnu b'matan arba. Go ahead and apply it two times that are four. Right? He's not as bothered by the extras because remember, he can have in mind that if it's extra, then it doesn't. Then it's going to be water, right? It'll be okay, right? Rabbi Yeshua says, Yinosnu b'matana achas. You only do a one application. He's not so worried about only doing one application, because we remember that Hillel said that even in those korbanos that require to be applied multiple times, doing it just once is acceptable, right? Even Beis Shammai said that that's fine by an ola and a shlamim, right? It was a chatos even that Hillel said was acceptable too. So therefore, you got to do is once. Amar lo Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer says, how are you only allowed to do one? Harehu over al bal tigra. You are going to be in violation of the prohibition of Bal Tigra. The pasuk says in Dvarim, Lo sosifu davar asher anochi mitzaveh eschem. Don't add to any of the mitzvos that I have given to you. V'lo sigru mimenu, and don't take away from any of the mitzvos. Lishmor es mitzvos Hashem Elokeichem asher anochi mitzaveh eschem. So you can't add and you can't subtract. If you have a mitzvah to do two times that are four and you only apply once, you're lowering the requirement of the mitzvah, and therefore that's a prohibition. That's in the Torah, Bal Tigra, don't reduce the mitzvos. Amar le Rabbi Yeshua says, Harehu over al Bal Tosif. He says, yeah, but if you apply it extra times, then you could be in violation of Bal Tosif. You're taking a bechor blood and you're applying it more times on the mizbeach than is necessary. That's bad. You can't do that. Typical examples of Bal Tosif, putting on 5 strands of tzitzis, 5 corners of your tzitzis, or 5 parshios of tefillin. If I add on to my mitzvah, so then that is a prohibition of Bal Tosif. So you can't do that either.
And what's the punishment for that?
All losa says if they have an action are going to be malchus, I would presume, right? Amar le, but there's also a potential here of a prohibition that doesn't have an action. If it's a losa say that has no shem b'maisa, then you don't get malchus for it, right? So Amar le Rabbi Eliezer. So Rabbi Eliezer says lo nemar bal tosif ela keshehu be'atzmo. He says it's not a problem with bal tosif. Why? Because bal tosif would be if you have a bechor blood and you decided to sprinkle this bechor blood 2 times that are 4. That's not what's happening here. This bechor blood is mixed together with an ola blood. The only reason you're doing it 2 times that are 4 is in the event that is possibly there's ola blood in it. So therefore, this is not a standard Bal Tosif case. You're not doing it because you are adding to the mitzvah of bechor. The extra sprinkling is because of the possibility that it has other blood mixed in. Amar le Rabbi Yeshua. Rabbi Yeshua says, Lo nemar bal tigra ela keshehu be'atzmo. Rabbi Yeshua says, no, I have the reverse way. Right? The reverse side, he says that Bal Tigra is also only when you're doing it by itself. Meaning, if I was taking my Ola and I was only applying it once, rather than applying it 2 times that are 4, you could accuse me of reducing the amount that I have to do for a mitzvah. You can't accuse me of reducing the amount that I need to do for the mitzvah when In fact, I am when I'm only doing it because because of the bechor that's in it. So the ode, and furthermore, Amar Rabbi Yeshua says, Keshenasata, when you decided, right, your way is going to be, I have blood here, I'm going to do 2 times that are 4. When you applied the blood extra times for the bechor, so avarta bal tosif, v'asisa ma'isa biyadcha, you have actively engaged in violation of the prohibition. You actively added extra steps to a bechor which are not there. Kishalot nasata, when you didn't put the blood except for 1 time, so then avarta bal tigra, then okay, maybe you're in violation of bal tigra, of reducing the amount of applications of an ola, but velo asisa ma'isa biyadcha, but you didn't do anything. A sheval tasa, you did the avera, as Yehuda wanted to know what's the punishment. Well, if you have a prohibition that I actively do, then I can get malchus. But if my prohibition comes about by inaction, that's a lot less. What?
But that's every lo sigra versus bal tosif, bal tigra, right?
Yes. So he's essentially suggesting bal tigra. I guess you're right that one would presume that bal tigra is less severe than bal tosif.
That's what it sounds like, yeah.
That's what it sounds like, right? So that's why he prefers to that you violate. If you are violating either one of the two, then better to violate bal tigra than bal tosif, right?
The argument that it's not Bal Tigra, but if it is Bal Tigra, then that's better.
That's what it sounds like, because that was the first part argument was, it's not Bal Tigra because it's not by itself, right? Because it's mixed together. You're not really reducing the service here of the ola. You're only doing it this way because of the bechor blood. That was argument number 1. And then number 2, okay, let's say I can't tell you whether it is Bal Tosif or Bal Tigra or whatever it is one of those 2 things. If it's both of those things, Bal Tigra is certainly the less thing to do. That's, I think, how the Mishnah is going.
When will we find out?
I don't need to find out. Says the Gemara.
Try it. See what happens.
Rabbi Elazar says, Lo hichshir Rabbi Elazar ela shnayim. 1 second. At the beginning, we had talked about that if you had mixed up the blood of the animal with a mum and the animals without a mum, that Rabbi Eliezer says that if you've already thrown one, then you could throw the rest, right? And that didn't we say before when we had this, when we mixed up the pieces of the animals, we said that he only allowed you to burn them 2 at a time, right? So he says you can only do this 2 at a time. About echad lo. So, but 1 at a time would not be. So it's going to be the same thing here by the cups of blood. If you've mixed them up, you got to throw 2 at a time. You can't throw 1 at a time. Just like we said by the rings of Avodah Zarah. Just like we said by the limbs of the korbanos. We've had this over and over. Meisiv Rav Dimi, and of course Rav Dimi is going to ask the question he asks every time. The Mishnah says that even if you have spilled just one of them, even if you only have one left, you got to pour it out. Well, how can you have one left? You're doing it pairs. So of course, even Rabbi Eliezer would agree if you only have one left, you've got to spill it out. So Amar le Rabbi Yaakov, le Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Tachlifa. So Rabbi Yaakov says to Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Tachlifa, Asper lecha, my echad, zug echad. I will explain it to you. I'm talking about one pair, right? It's 1 pair is left. So it is indeed that you have to do pairs. Just like we had said in the past, and I talked at my head of Chavrusa this morning, we were going over this, and I asked if he agreed with my position that I was explaining it here, that basically we're turning it into a suffix fake again, that he's got 2 animals at the same time, so therefore it's probably not one of these 2, but definitely not both of them, so the one I'm doing is probably fine. And even if it isn't, the one that I did at first is also fine. And he said, no, I'm not sure that that's the explanation. So I'm not quite sure exactly what the logic. I said, what do you think the logic of that is? He says, I don't know. So I'm not 100% sure exactly what the logic is, but he requires 2 by 2 so that you can say, since the one I'm doing here is one of the 2 that I'm doing here is definitely fine, it's probably the one that I did first. In any event, that's his shita that you can always rely on. The first one is gone, as long as you do 2 at a time. Now, why do I keep bringing up the same thing? I already learned Rabbi Eliezer Shita 1 time. Utsricha, I need to see it again. Why? Di mar beha, because if it was learned over here, I would say beha kam Rabbi Eliezer bishum dis avid be kaparaso. The answer is, here's where Rabbi Eliezer would say that where he's saying that you're doing the kapara by sprinkling the blood, So therefore, here is where we are going to be able to rely. It seems like the other way around. Am I saying it right? Yeah, no, I have it backwards, right? He says if it was the circumstance of the avarim, if it was the circumstance of the limbs, I would say, okay, under the circumstance of the limbs, since the blood was sprinkled appropriately, now the issue is, can I burn the limbs? So there's where Rabbi Eliezer says, okay, we can be lenient on burning the limbs because the korban was ultimately brought properly, right? We did sprinkle the blood properly. Now we just have the limbs question. We mixed them up. Okay, I can rely on the fact that the first one was the one that was bad. Aval, beha, but in the circumstance here, where we're dealing with the blood being thrown, ema modu le rabbanan, he might say, let's agree with the rabbanan here, because we don't even have a kosher korban in the first place. So therefore, why would we go ahead and finish this sacrifice and throw the blood? We should just call the whole thing off. You've already got a bad mix-up, just call it off. So therefore, nope, this tells me even still, he says his opinion and says you can go ahead and sprinkle it. Mar baha, and if we had the case of the sprinkling, baha kami rabbanan, that's where the rabbanan would say we call it off. Because the sprinkling, you don't even have a kosher korban. So why would you go ahead with a circumstance of suffix and throw that on the mizbeach where it's not even a kosher korban yet? Aval baha, but in the case of the limbs, maybe they would agree. Ema modula Rabbi Eliezer, they might agree with Rabbi Eliezer and say, okay, fine. Once we already have a valid korban, you may as well be lenient and put it on top of the mizbeach. So tzrichos. The answer is no. I learned it in both cases. The Rabbanan never allowed me to rely on the suffix and put something that doesn't belong in the base of Mikdash on the mizbeach on. And Rabbi Eliezer always says we can rely on the fact that the first one was destroyed already. It's not awesome. Okay, we learned in a Mishnah over there. Cases that we've had already. Tzluchis shenaflu sochamayim kolshehu. You've got a container that has paraduma water in it. Okay, and into it falls a drop of water. Rabbi Eliezer says, Yozeh shtei hazos. What you do is you sprinkle twice, normally one dip of the hyssop into that's a branch of a tree, into the water, and then you sprinkle it onto the person, and that purifies him.
The paraduma water, is like the blood from the paraduma?
It's water mixed with ashes from the paraduma. Okay, and so there's no blood there, right? It's water from the ashes. So you take it, you sprinkle it, but you do it twice. Rabbi Eliezer says, because now we've got water mixed in here that's not good. The chachamim posel. The chachamim say no, it's possible. Now that you've got mixed in water, it's no good. Can't do it. So bishlam rabbanon. Yeah, but.
The water that you poured, put the ashes into the paraduma. Put the paraduma ash, you put it into regular water.
Yes.
It's regular tap water.
As part of that process and procedure. No, it was not tap water. It was mayim chayim.
Lake water.
Mayim chayim. Okay.
Here's where going to be our issue, right? This is water that's the water that could not have been used for paraduma. If you have mayim chayim, maybe you're right. Maybe that's not going to be an invalidator here. Here you took some of your bottled water and you spilled it in. Right? That's going to be your problem. Okay. It's a good question.
Rainwater?
Rainwater would be if it's direct,
lake
right?
Water.
It has to. So lake water is fine, right? It just can't be drawn. It can't be she'uvin. It can't be drawn, and it can't be gathered. If once it's gathered in a cistern, right, that's where it's not. It has to be flowing. Okay.
Not Lake Erie water, because that doesn't flow. Okay, that just kind of sits.
That's creepy.
Yeah.
It's eerie. Very good. The pun. It's all pun and games. Here we go. Bishlama rabbanan savri yesh bila. So fine. I understand what the rabbanan are holding. Rabbanan have to hold a series of things. Number one, yesh bila. Bila means that there's diffusion. I think that's the word. Diffusion is when you put a drop of liquid into another container of liquid, we presume equal distribution of that liquid throughout the mixture. Because it could be that the piece of the drop that you have got put in one place and then stayed in that one place, and then the rest of it is fine, right? The answer is that the Chachamim are holding when liquid mixes with liquid, we presume equal distribution throughout the mixture. That's number one. Number two, that there's a certain amount that you need to sprinkle. How much is that? The amount of water one gets on a hyssop when you dip it into water. Okay, so now what the problem is that you have this non-acceptable water mixed in everywhere you go. So when I dip my hyssop into the water, it has a combination automatically, since it's distributed throughout, of water that's mechatos plus a little bit of the non-mechatos water, which means, since the volume that I require is the volume of one hyssop branch can hold, this hyssop is holding a little bit less than that because it's also holding some of the non-valid water. Okay, no problem. Just do a second dip, right? Ve'ein mitzarfin lahazos. You can't do two sprinklings. All the sprinklings have got to be done in one shot. That's our rule. So therefore, those are our three things together, means that the Chacham say, now there's no possible way for you to get this a kosher sprinkling out of this water. You're always going to have kosher water mixed with a little bit of non-kosher water. You can't combine it, and therefore you're stuck. Okay? Ella, the question is Rabbi Eliezer, my kasavar. What is Rabbi Eliezer holding? That's where our question is. I kasavar ein bila. If the issue is, what's he holding? That there isn't a mixture throughout. So, okay, so therefore, what are you worried about? That when you dip it in the first time, that the water that you're going to take out is going to be invalid water. Okay, so then, ki moze shte hazos, my havi. So what are you saying? So therefore, what he's holding is, when you dip it in the first time, you might have some of the bad water, you might have the bad water on it, therefore sprinkle it, and then go dip it in again and continue. How does that help you? The second one also could have a bit of the bad water on it. In other words, what the presumption is that we're going to find at one point, one of those two dippings is going to have completely valid water on it because you just got to dip it twice because it's not mixed around. So therefore, but you can't tell that, right? Even though we don't know it's equally diffused throughout. It's somewhere, which means that you could have a little bit of it on the first branch that you sprinkle and a little bit on the second branch you sprinkle, dip it a third time, you still might have a little bit. You don't know what's on it. So how's that going to help you? So, Dilma Tarvaihu Maya Kamazi. Maybe on both of the sprinklings you've got some of the water that was not appropriate on it. Ella, so rather, Kasavar Yeshbila. Let's start with the presumption that he holds, yes, it's equally diffused throughout. Ikasavar, now what is he holding? If he holds ein hazah tzricha shiur, if he holds that you don't need an amount, so lama lishte hazos, then why would I bother needing two, right? Whatever amount I sprinkle is going to be sufficient at that point, right? So therefore, I don't need two, one would be sufficient. Ela kasavar hazah tzricha shiur. Rather, he must mean that you need to have a certain amount. That's why one time is not going to be enough. V'ikasavar ein mitzarfin lahazos. So now, if he holds that the sprinklings don't combine, well, now that's what the Chachamim held. And ki mozeh shtei hazos ma'havi. What's the second sprinkling going to do? You're never going to get the right shear. That's why the Chachamim don't require a second one. V'inami mitzarfin lahazos. Now, even if you say that they do combine together, mi yemar demoli le shiura. How's that going to wind up proving that we've got the right volume of the shear? At the end of the day, maybe what he's got here is less than a shear the first time, less than a shear the second time. He's got to keep going, right? We don't know how much he's got, but it's diffused throughout. So Amar Reish Lakish. So Reish Lakish explains, here's going to be three explanations for what's happening here. Number one, Liolam Yesh Bila. Number one, he agrees the water is diffused throughout. Now, and there's a certain amount that you need. What's going on here? What happens is that there's only one drop, one branchful of water that falls into this water. Therefore, when you sprinkle twice, you've definitely sprinkled at least since the way that the Rashi says lav dafka, but there's at worst case scenario a 50-50 split in the amount that's kosher and the amount that's non-kosher. So if you sprinkle twice and you can combine the two sprinklings together, you have 50% of the shear the first time you're sprinkling and 50% of the shear the second time you're sprinkling. And therefore, between the two sprinklings, you've got it covered. Okay? That's how Reish Lakish interprets it. Right? Of course, you could have more kosher water in it. That's not going to bother us. In which case, you could have 90% on the first sprinkling, and then the second sprinkling, you'll cover your last 10%.
Is all water kosher to begin with?
We're not saying kosher for paraduma, right? It's got to be kosher for paraduma, right? Rava says, Liola, so that's how Reish Lakish answers it. Reish Lakish answers it, we're dealing with a very small amount of invalid water that fell in, and therefore by sprinkling twice, we've got the full shear covered. Okay, that's number one. Rava says, Liolam yesh bila. I'll agree. Nope, what's going on here is There is a complete dilution of the mixture. V'azah ein tzricha shiur. But you don't need a volume. You don't need to have a certain amount. Okay, so therefore all he's got to do is one sprinkle, right? One sprinkle is sufficient, because even if half of the water that's on this branch is no good, the other half is good, and there's no minimum amount. So he's okay, right? The answer is, so why do you require two? The answer is, uknasu de kansura banan. The rabbi said, sprinkle a second time as a punishment. Kihechi delo mishtarish le, so that you don't wind up with more paraduma water than you started off with. We don't want somebody to benefit from the problem. Right? You've dropped more water in, and now you go, great, I used to have this much mechatos, now I've got this much mechatos, I'm better off now that I've mixed it up.
Which is not much more.
Yeah, but it's more, right? And we don't want you to benefit from it. So therefore, we're going to make you sprinkle a second time to use up the extra that you put in.
As a consequence.
As a consequence.
Could this be like, even if it's not just a little bit of water that's selling?
So yeah, so the thing is, but the answer is yes. It doesn't seem to be that the amount matters much, but I wonder how much of a punishment it is if it's a significant amount of water that falls in and you're only going to sprinkle one branch worth, right? So
What I'm wondering is could you put rov poured water?
you can't definitely do rov, right? Rov is not, min is batal b'mino, min b'mino is batal with rov. So you're going to probably wind up with less than rov, right? That way it's still midoraisa, still considered mechatos. And then you're sprinkling, but you're not sprinkling, you're sprinkling.
The shear of the mechatas, but it's still mechatas. So
Correct.
rov.
That's what I think. Yeah. Rav Ashi gives his third opinion. Ein bila, he says, no, it doesn't mix completely throughout. Yozeh shtei hazos. Sorry, I skipped. Rav Ashi, Omer ein bila, yozeh shtei hazos, which we changed the gear say here, which is mayim kol shehu tanan ve'ein bila. He says, what's going on is mayim kol shehu. I have to change the girsa here. That Rabbi Eliezer says that the pasuk says that you don't need a certain amount, right? He agrees that you don't need any amount. However, he disagrees where he says that it's a knas. He says the Mishnah says mayim kol shechan. The Mishnah says any amount of water, meaning that we're talking about a tzluchas that a drop of water fell in. So according to him, it has to be a very small amount. So therefore, ein ve'ein bila. There's no mixing here. So therefore, yozeh shtei hazos, you sprinkle twice. Why? Because by sprinkling twice, you will get the full volume of a sprinkling in combination of the two. You don't know what's mixed in the first time, right? So therefore, the first dipping, but between the two, you're going to be fine, right? Because if the entire amount of bad water is on the first one, then the entire amount is fine on the second one. If the amount that's on the first one is half, then the second one, the worst it could be is half. So therefore, between the two, you'll be fine. That's how Rav Ashi learns it. Okay, so now we're going to have questions on 2 out of these 3, which is going to leave us with one version that stands. Meisvei. So they're going to start with Reish Lakish. We're going to ask on Reish Lakish's view. Again, Reish Lakish said that it's mixed in together. He says that there is a shear that's required. What was Reish Lakish? Second. Make sure I got Reish Lakish. Reish Lakish says that there's bila, you need a certain amount, and what happens is only one drop fell in, right? So therefore, between the 2 sprinklings, you're going to cover the whole amount. So here's our problem with this. Rebbe says, L'divrei Rabbi Eliezer, according to the Shita of Rabbi Eliezer, Hazah kol shehu mitaheres. Any amount of liquid is going to create you to be tahor. So, and it's ein tzricha shiur. So you don't need to have any amount. Hazah mechza kosher. If you mechza pasel, hazah mechza kosher mechza pasel is so you can even sprinkle half. If you've got the sprinkling of your branch has half kosher water and half pasel water, you're fine. That's according to Rabbi Eliezer. So that means that Reish Lakish, according to Rebbe's understanding of Rabbi Eliezer, according to this brisa, is incorrect, because Reish Lakish said that you need a shear. That's why we're going back and sprinkling a second time, because there's a minimal value. Now Rebbe's saying it's very clear, not like that. There's no minimal volume. So the issue is not minimum volume. Okay, so that is going to knock off Reish Lakish's view. Ve'od Tanya, we learned in another brisa, behedya, it says we're going to take the word behedya out. Ve'od Tanya, hanisonin lemalo shenis arvu b'nisonin lemata. Our Mishnah says that if you've got blood that is supposed to be sprinkled above the red line with blood that's sprinkled below the red line. Rabbi Eliezer Omer, Rabbi Eliezer says, yitain lemala v'tachtonim olim lo. That you should place it above, you should sprinkle it above, and we'll change this girsa too. We have a lot of girsa changes. Veroa ani es atachtonim lemala kilu hein mayim.
What's the reason between the girsa and these ones?
Yeah, it's a question. Sometimes different pages of Gemara get confused over time, and why one page has a whole series of girsa changes and other Gemaras don't. It's a good question. I'm not sure exactly how it happens, but it seems that this one has some girsa changes. So what it says here is that it makes sense because we know what Rabbi Eliezer says. It's in our Mishnah. So we go back to what our Mishnah says. You're going to take this mixture of blood that's a partial of ola and partial of chatas. You're going to sprinkle it above the red line, taking care of the chatas element. And what's our problem? Our problem is the ola element. The answer is that he holds that you can visualize the blood, if it's an ola, as though it were water, and it doesn't bother us. And that's fine. Now, via mart ein bila. If you are holding what it is that Rav Ashi said, Rav Ashi says that the water is not going to diffuse evenly throughout, and so this blood is also not necessarily going to diffuse throughout. So then, amai alulo. Why is it that if you go and you take this mixture of ola blood and chatas blood and you apply it above the red line, how do you know it works? Right? Maybe Dilma kayahiv elyonim lamata v'atachtonim lamala. Maybe what you've done is you've applied the blood, right? The reason that we assumed it worked is because when you applied the mixture of blood, we presumed that there was some ola blood in that mixture and there was some chatos blood in that mixture, and therefore I applied it above the red line. I took care of my chatos, and the ola didn't bother me because I could look at it as though it were water. But if I don't believe that it's mixed evenly, then when I applied the blood above the red line, I might only have ola blood in my hand. And if I only have ola blood in my hand, how's that helping me with my chatos? And then I go below the red line and I apply the blood again. Well, the second time I'm applying the blood, how do I know that I don't only have chatos blood with me? We have to say that Rabbi Eliezer holds yesh bila, that the mixture is completely diffused. Is that the right word? Diffused? Equally diffused? Right? That's the scientific word, right?
I
have to check with my doctor.
They go with
Right?
blending.
Blended, but it has to be completely
Diffusion sounds better.
right.
Yeah, it does.
Because then because diffusion isn't that the equal spread of the particles
Right.
throughout a solution.
Fully soluble.
Right.
Like you
Correct.
use your bomb or something.
I should know this. I do a middle school science. Right? I should know that. It's a term that I should know. So
One is
Let's
blood.
diffuse the
and
situation.
One is water.
and it seems to be that they presume that there's no difference, even though you'd say, well, maybe there should be because blood is thicker than water. That nevertheless, right? But nevertheless, it seems that since the two liquids are the same, we're going to presume that they are going to spread throughout evenly. Okay, so therefore you see that Rabbi Eliezer holds clearly that they do spread throughout, which is in contrast to what Rav Ashi suggested, who presumed that they don't spread throughout. So, okay, Hacha b'mayaskinon. So here's what's going on here. Kagon de'ikar ruba el yonim v'kayahiv lemala shir tachtonim v'od. Here's what happened. I took.
Back to the drawing board.
When you have to start drawing, you know that it gets. Okay. I've got. This is my 50% line, right? So I've got 51% of my blood is upper blood, and 49% of my blood is lower blood. Right? Here's my bar. Right?
I'm ready to see the color.
I've got 49 versus 51. So now, what do? Right? I've got upper blood and I've got lower blood. What I've done is that I take 50% of my blood and I apply it above. If I take 50% of my blood, there's no way I don't get some of the upper blood because I don't have enough blood from the lower blood to make 50% up. So if I take 50%, the reason why it works is because I've got this little sliver that's definitely in the mixture. That's why it works. Oh, so even if there's ein bila, even if it's not equally mixed. Yeah, but the problem with that is that, right, the lower blood is now I'm going to go back and I'm going to apply it to my lower blood. Well, if you're presuming that if I did 50%, this whole section is now gone and this little bit, that's my worst case scenario. Well, I have a new worst case scenario below. All I'm left with is this, which means that the lower doesn't work. My Ola is going to be invalid. That's going to be the question. So, it says, first of all, the ode, right, so he's going to share tachtonim v'od. So the answer is no. Ha tachtonim olu lo katani. How could that be? Because then you next say that the blood application below is going to be effective. How could it be? Theoretically, you've just thrown this whole thing on the top, which means you're left with this on the bottom. This section on the bottom is all upper blood. It's not going to work. So the answer is l'shem shirayim. It doesn't work as a korban ola. It works as shirayim for the chatos. And therefore, only the chatos is effective. The ola is not effective. That's a novel interpretation of our Mishnah, not what we thought. Okay? But we're going to, that's the suggestion there. Toshma, we'll try again. Nason lemata velo nimlach. Right? Now let's say he makes the blood application below and he doesn't check whether he's supposed to or not. Rabbi Eliezer Omer, Yachzor v'yitein lemala. So Rabbi Eliezer says, okay, now that he's applied some of the blood below, he can go back above and apply the blood above. V'atachtonim alulo, and the blood that he applied below can be counted as your ola. Okay? Now, how could you do that? So Hachanami beruba elyonim. The answer is, now we're going to say the rov is upper blood, and so therefore you applied some of the blood below, and we say, okay, well, that should have done that, but now he can go back and apply it above, because most of the blood is going to be acceptable above, and he's going to definitely have. V'kayov lemala shir tachtonim v'od. He puts the amount of blood that he had that would have been below, plus a little bit, and therefore he definitely has some upper blood. Yeah, but the problem is, v'hod tachtonim alu lo katani. So it says, yeah, but then we said the lower blood counted. So the answer is l'shem shirayim. Again, it's because it counts as the extra leftover blood to be put below. We'll try one more time, and we'll take a break for the evening. Toshma, come listen. Nosnan lemala v'lo nimlach. He applied it above and he didn't check. Elu ve'elu modim sheyachzor v'yitein lemata. Everyone agrees that you're going to go back and you're going to apply the blood below. Ve'elu ve'elu olulo, and both of the applications are going to be effective. So hachanami beruba elyonim. So again, what's happening is that the majority is upper. V'kayohiv lemala shir tachtonim v'od, and again you're applying most of the majority above. Therefore, you are definitely getting some blood of the above and being okay. Now it says v'ha elu ve'elu olu lo ktani. It says in there, it says that both of them are going to count for him. So how's the blood application below going to count if he's already sprinkled all the below blood above? Mikatani elu ve'elu modim. It says elu ve'elu olu lo ktani. So it says, doesn't say that elu ve'elu agree that they count, right? We're not going to say the Bryce, the Rabban, and Rabbi Eliezer are agreeing that the Ola and the Chatas both are effective. It says, Elu what did I do? I just squished my thing until my cap was on. Making a mess of this table.
It's washable.
It is, but I should squish the marker. Elu ve'elu olu lo katani. It says that it just says stam, right? Both of them are going to count for him. So Seifa Osan l'Rabbanon de'amri yesh bila. The end of this Mishnah is going according to the Rabbanon, who say that it is equally mixed. And therefore, according to the end, which says that if you threw some of it above, the bottom of it is going to work, because in every of the sprinkling, you're going to have some that is effective and some that is not. Okay, it's a good place for us to stop.
Very easy.
We're going to continue.
Very, if you ask me, small, very simple. Come listen.
Yes, Toshin. Come and listen tomorrow.